Hi everyone, a warm welcome to this FSSC Insights webinar. This is the second public webinar we organized this year, and we're very proud and honored that we have so many participants. We have more than 5,000 registrants to this webinar, and that shows the interest in the topic. We want to talk about FSSC 22000 version 6, and we know that a lot of people are very interested in that topic. So I'm very happy that I'm not alone, because this is quite an important topic and we have experts with us. And I'm very proud and honored that we have Elsebi Matthee, our technical director. Hello, Elsebi, great you're here. And also we have from South Africa, we have the live broadcasting from South Africa. We have Kelly Mulholland, who is our technical manager. And they will do the difficult part of this webinar, so that makes it easy for me. Let's go to the topics of today. I will do a short introduction and hand over quickly to Kelly and to Elsebi to talk more in depth about FSSC 22000, especially about version 6, the overview of version 6, what are the changes, what are the benefits, what is the upgrade process for certified organizations, what are the main changes in the scheme? So that is, I think, very important to understand. The changes really make FSSC 22000 much stronger. And also we have time for a Q&A. I think that's also important that you can come with questions to our experts. Some practicalities before I do a short introduction. Everyone is muted. We are with many people. So of course everyone is muted. But we give you the opportunity to make it an interactive webinar, and we really like to see your questions. So please raise your questions in the questions section of this webinar, and we will, at the end of the webinar, we will go through the questions and try to answer as many as possible. Also, it's important to know that we record this webinar because we also want to make sure that you get the recording, but it's also available for other people's. So you will receive a link to the recording. And also we will make sure that you get a copy of all the slides. So that will be shared later after this webinar to each of you. A short introduction about FSSC. Yeah, you might know us already, but we are the Foundation FSSC. And I think what is quite unique is that we are a truly independent and non-profit foundation. And we are the owner of 22000, but also of the new program, the 24000. And what we find important is to deliver trust and impact beyond certification. We really support the consumer good industry because we know how important it is that the brands are protected. It's very important, the reputation and image of brands is on the highest level. And we want to support the brands in the consumer good industry to protect this and also ensure they have a risk-based approach for every risk area they might find important. And also we are a lean collaborative foundation. And that is important because we really want to support without having a big organization, and we like to collaborate. Internal collaboration is very important, but also external collaboration. And in the end, we want also to be aligned and support to contribute to the global SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. This is what we call our branded house. And as you know, every house needs to have a strong foundation, and you find our values as a foundation. I will not go into detail, but you see transparency, integrity, ambition, engagement and care. You will recognize these words, but these are the high values that we really find important in everything we do in our own organization and in our collaboration with others. Then our house has 3 pillars. We have the schemes, the certification programs, 22000, you all know, but also we have now the new program for social management systems, and that is the FSSC 24000. The second pillar is assurance. Reliable certification, reliable audits is most important. And we really have a very big program to ensure that together with our partners, our audits are at the highest level of quality and the highest level of assurance. We find that very important. And you always need to improve. So continuous improvement is the third pillar of our branded house. And it all has to lead to supporting the brands together with us to create a better world. That is what we try to do together with you. I'd like to shortly introduce our representatives around the world. We have, of course, all our people in FSSC are very important, and we work together very strongly. But we have a number of representatives, and you see their names and you see their faces. And we're very proud on this team, and they represent us in different areas in the world. And if any questions or you need any support, you can call out to them, or you can call out to FSSC, and we will make sure that we connect you with them. And then, my final slide, before I hand over to the real experts, some other new developments. 24,000, I said it already, a new certification program for social management systems. You find all information on our website. And also we will have the next public webinar on the 12th of September. So don't forget it, put it in your agenda on 24,000, dedicated to this topic. So you're welcome to register also for that webinar. And then something new is also FSSC On-Site. And that is what we call our digital solution, that you get access to the public part of our database. And you find all the certified organizations there, also the details on the scope of their activities, the validity of their certificates, and also there are some smart functionalities that you can use to get real-time information on the validity of certificates. I will not go into that now. Go to our website, this is the link, and you can go there and find more details how you can subscribe to FSSC On-Site. And now I think time to hand over to the real experts. I start with Elsie. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cor. And hello, everyone on the webinar. I'm not going to do the most important bit today. That I will leave to Kelly to go into more detail. But I will quickly start off with a little bit more of an overview on FSSC 22000. So what makes FSSC 22000 special? We provide a framework for a robust and effective food safety management system. So with the emphasis on management systems, because we utilize existing ISO standards, and the benefit, or one of the benefits of that, is that it's all aligned to the harmonized structure, and that in itself then facilitates integrated management system audits, as well as implementing the IMS within organizations. It is a science-based standard because it's developed by international experts, and therefore also, we believe, reliable. It is GFSI recognized and has been for a very long time, and that also contributes to the global acceptance. And as Cor referred to just previously, one of the key things is our integrity program, and this is the program we use to make sure that our certification bodies are delivering the audits and the certification to the standard and to our requirements. Now, I think a lot of you have seen this slide before. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but what I would like to show you, or to maybe just point out, is the journey of FSSC. So as you can see, we started back in 2010, which from a scheme perspective is not that long ago. So just over a decade. We started with version 1, and today I'm very happy to say that we have come to version 6. So there has been development over the years, and with that, scopes have changed and requirements has been added. I think the other important thing to point out is that we work with a lot of our partners, we call them partners, which is certification bodies. At the moment, we deal with around 120 certification bodies. We also have training organizations and accreditation bodies. And then also very good news always for us is we currently have more than 32,000 certificates. And while that's not the focus of the scheme, it does go towards the acceptance in the market and the trust that people place in our certification. And then here on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the different sectors that is currently covered within FSSC. So it covers a big chunk of the supply chain, so from animal feed all the way through to retail. And then maybe just also something quickly to point out in terms of development of the scheme is we have a board of stakeholders who basically governs the input into the scheme, what ends up in the scheme. They are supported by an advisory committee, and this is a group of experts that really help us to make sure that we put the relevant and the right requirements into the scheme. But let's go back to version 6, because that's what we're here for today. So what was the main drivers for development of V6? Now, some of you might know some of the accreditation norms. So, for example, ISO 22003 is one of the accreditation norms that supports our scheme. And there has been an update in this document in 2022. So this was one of the main drivers for us to update our scheme requirements. But scheme development for us goes more and over and above than just the requirements from accreditation or in ISO. We also really want to strengthen the requirements to support our organizations, also in the contribution to meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then as part of the normal Plan to Check Act, the continuous improvement, we also made editorial changes and also some amendments. And with amendments, we mean sort of clarifying, making requirements clearer. And this we get typically from the feedback that we get through our help desk, from our stakeholders. So there's a continuous drive to make sure that our requirements are as clear as possible. And then some additional benefits, and this is in terms of version 6 specifically, is you will have noticed that we've added a requirement on food loss and waste. Now, I have also included a slide here at the bottom that shows you within the supply chain that there's about 40% of food that is lost over the supply chain. A third of that occurs pre-farm or on the farm. Then you have like a manufacturing processing part, which contributes to another third. And the last third occurs at the retail or the household consumption. So actually, when you think about it, it's quite a lot of food that is lost even before it reaches the consumer. And this is why we really, as part of our mission in FSSC contributing to creating a better world, we really wanted to make a difference. This is one of the ways that we feel we're contributing to that. We're contributing to the SDG 12.3 that you can see on the screen, and really make an impact through our organizations. We have also included some quality control parameters, as well as food safety and quality culture in the scheme. Now, the quality control, I think Kelly will explain a little bit further when she gets to part 2 of the scheme. I think it's important to point out that the intent here is not to encompass a full management system. We focused on specific quality control parameters that is complementary to food safety. We've also added in measures to aid in certificate authenticity, such as the addition of a QR code on each certificate. And then we've also introduced a new scope. Now in version 6, there's a new category, F2, for trading and brokering. And as I said previously, we've added in some further detail just to make sure that the scheme is better understandable and also to aid with the application of it. But I know one of the questions people always ask when there's a new scheme version that's being published is, what does it mean for me? So I'll quickly go just top line over the V6 upgrade process. And as you can see, and as you probably know, version 6 was published in April of this year. This is available on our website, as well as a main changes version. So when you go to our website and you go to the scheme document section for version 6, the whole of version 6 is available as a free download. And there's also a section that's called main changes or a gap assessment, where you can see the detail of all the changes that has been made. We are giving a 12-month transition window to allow for all organizations to prepare and properly implement the new version. So the first audits to version 6 will therefore commence on the 1st of April next year. And then So it does not mean that on the 1st of April, everybody now has to have V6 certification. Obviously, that's not possible because organizations have their audits at different times during the year. So organizations then have from the 1st of April 2024 until the end of March 2025 to upgrade to version 6. And I think it's also important to emphasize and to highlight that no audits to version 6 will be possible before the 1st of April next year. So for the remainder of this year and the first quarter of next year, the audits will still be conducted to version 5.1. If you want to have more detail on the actual upgrade process, as I said, please go to the website where you can download the upgrade paper, and that goes into a lot more detail in terms of the specific changes and requirements. And then when we get to the scheme itself, I thought it would be good to just explain a little bit more in terms of the structure of FSSC, the scheme itself. So this is for organizations being audited. If you are an organization being audited to FSSC 22000, you will be audited to ISO 22000, the relevant sector-specific PRP, and it might be one or it might be more PRP standards. It just depends on what is the scope of your audit. And then the FSSC additional requirements. And that is the bit that's described specifically in part 2 of our scheme. Now, when we look at the changes for V6 in terms of organizations, there has been no change in ISO 22000, and the sector PRPs are also still the same. So the change occurs in part 2 of the scheme, and this is the bit that Kelly will also elaborate on further. And this just briefly shows you an overview of what the scheme structure looks like. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but obviously there is more to the scheme than what we are describing here today. So of the 5 parts, I will just give a very top line overview of the main changes in part 1, and then Kelly will focus on the changes in part 2, and this is the requirements for the organizations to be audited to. So when we look at part 1 of the scheme, there has been some changes, and most of this relates to the ISO 22003 changes. So this accreditation norm that I was referring to previously, there has been changes in this document linked to the categories and subcategories, and we have aligned the scheme to that. So some of the main ones include that there is now a C0, which is animal primary conversion, for example, your slaughterhouses. And this is not really new. In essence, slaughterhouses was previously included under the scope of FSSC, but it previously was under C1, which is the processing of perishable animal products. And the same applies with category B3. It's a new subcategory, but previously it was included under the perishable plant-based products in C2. So B3 is the pre-process handling of plant products. So this is your typical fruit and vegetable pack houses. What is new for FSSC, not new in terms of ISO 22, but new for FSSC, is the introduction of the scope on trading and brokering, which you can see in F2. And then another big change, and it's a change in terms of that there's been movement in the subcategories, is pet food was previously included under category D. So it fell under the processing of feed and animal food. This has now been moved to the manufacturing scopes, so to category C, and it would depend on the type of pet food that you are producing in which C category it will fall. For example, if you have canned pet food, that, for example, would go under C4. So it just depends on what is the type of pet food that your company is producing. But when we do a scheme update, we also challenge ourselves and look at, is everything still relevant in the scheme? And therefore, we have also, after very, very long discussions, made the decision to remove the farming scope from the scheme, which is category A. And we've also made the decision to remove the product called FSSC 22000 quality. because typically this involved an FSSC 22000 audit combined with an ISO 9001 audit, and then a FSSC 22000 quality certificate was issued. It does not mean with us removing this product that organizations cannot still audit to FSSC 22000 and 9001. That can definitely still happen and will continue to happen. The only difference is that you will end up with having two certificates. And now I'm going to hand over to Kelly, who will go into more detail on part 2. As I said, this is where all the action is happening, where we've changed existing requirements, updated it. We hope we've made it better, and we've introduced some new requirements. So I'm handing over to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Hi all. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks Elsabe and thanks Core for your introduction so far and for going through part 1 of the scheme. So we're now going to have a look at part 2 of the scheme, which addresses the requirements for organizations to be audited. So firstly, we're going to have a look at scheme changes and interpretations. So in addition to the scheme documents and the Board of Stakeholders decision list, the Foundation also publishes interpretation articles on the MyFSSC platform. This platform is available to all licensed certification bodies, and these articles have now also been included within the scheme. So these articles include further clarification on requirements and the application or implementation of certain requirements. And they need to be adhered to by certification bodies as well as certified organizations. And it is the CB's responsibility to ensure that they keep up to date with these interpretation articles and also to communicate the relevant articles to relevant parties, both within the certification body as well as to the certified organizations. So therefore, if you are a certified organization and your CB at times makes reference to and shares interpretation articles published by the Foundation with you, this is in order to assist in clarifying certain requirements included within the scheme. So to also clarify, these scheme interpretation articles are in place to assist with clarification on existing requirements, and they're not there to include new requirements. So any new requirements or changes to existing requirements are still done through the Board of Stakeholders decision list or via a scheme version update, such as version 6. So now we're going to be having a look at some of the strengthened additional requirements within part 2 of the scheme. So this includes new requirements being added into current additional requirements to strengthen certain of the requirements. And firstly, if we have a look at additional requirement 2.5.1 on management of services and purchase materials, this requirement was added specifically for category I on packaging materials, and it's for organizations to establish criteria related to the use of recycled packaging materials as raw material inputs. Then under additional requirement 2.5.2 on product labeling and printed materials, a requirement was added relating to the control of claims on product labeling and packaging. And this includes that where a claim is made, the organization shall maintain evidence of the validation to support the claim that they're making, as well as to have verification systems in place. Also under 2.5.2 on product labeling and printed materials, a requirement was added specifically also for category I, and this was to have organizations establish and implement artwork management and print control procedures. So this requirement also further details what is required to be within that procedure, and you're able to see that on the slide. Then next, if we have a look at additional requirement 2.5.3 on food defense and additional requirement 2.5.4 on food fraud mitigation, a requirement was added specifically for category F2, which was the new category that's been included into the FSSC scheme that Elsabe mentioned on trading and brokering. So here, a specific additional requirement was added for organizations who are category F2 organizations to ensure that their suppliers have a food defense plan and a food fraud mitigation plan in place. Then to have a look at additional requirement 2.5.5 on logo use. A requirement was added for certified organizations, whereby when they are needing to utilize the FSSC logo, they are able to request a copy of the latest version of the FSSC logo from their certification bodies, as all of our licensed certification bodies have access to the latest FSSC logo, and this may be requested directly from them. Then further on to logo use, we updated this requirement to 2.5.5c to indicate that the certified organization is not allowed to use the FSSC 22000 logo, any statement, or make reference to its certified status on certificates of analysis or certificates of conformance, or where there is an exclusion to the scope of the certification being applied. So this is an addition to what was previously part of the requirement and what is still part of it, which indicates that it's also not allowed to be used on a product, its labeling, packaging, or in any other manner that implies that the FSSC 22000 scheme approves a product, a process, or a service. Then next, we also provided further clarification and additional detail on certain existing requirements, such as for allergen management and environmental monitoring. So first, if we have a look at additional requirement 2.5.6 on the management of allergens, this was updated to include that in addition to having a risk assessment and control measures in place, the organization also has to have a list of allergens handled on site, including for raw materials and finished products. They need to ensure that their control measures have been validated and that there's verification in place. And this also includes that where more than one product is produced in the same production area, which have different allergen profiles, verification testing shall be conducted. And this needs to be conducted at frequency based on risk. It also addresses that precautionary or warning labels shall only be used when the outcome of the risk assessment identifies that cross-contamination is a risk to the consumer. And it also indicates that, and it's also very important to note that applying warning labels does not exempt the organization from implementing the necessary allergen control measures or undertaking verification testing within their organization. Further specific requirements for the management of allergens include the need for allergen awareness training and specific training associated with the personnel's area of work in relation to allergens, as well as for the review of the allergen management plan to take place at least annually and when a trigger occurs. And then specifically for category food chain category D for animal feed, a specific clarification was made in the scheme that where there is no allergen-related legislation in the country of sale pertaining to animal feed, this additional requirement is not applicable unless an allergen status claim has been made on the product. Then for additional requirement 2.5.7 on environmental monitoring, it was also further clarified that the environmental monitoring program is a risk-based program that addresses the relevant pathogens, spoilage, and indicator organisms, and an additional requirement was added for the environmental monitoring program to also be reviewed at least annually or when any of the triggers occur that are listed under this requirement in the scheme. Now to have a look at 2.5.10 on transport and storage and warehousing. A requirement was added under 2.5.10d relating to the use of transport tankers. So this requirement addresses that where an organization uses tankers for transport of final product, then they need to have a documented risk-based plan to address transport tank cleaning, including having this consider the potential sources of cross-contamination, the appropriate control measures, as well as cleaning validation in place. Also under this requirement in relation to the organizations that are receiving raw materials in tankers, they are required to have a supplier agreement in place, which addresses tanker cleaning validation, as well as restrictions linked to prior use of the vehicle or the tanker, as well as any other applicable control measures. To have a look at additional requirement 2.511 on hazard control and measures for preventing cross-contamination, a requirement was added under point D relating to foreign matter management specifically. So this includes a requirement for a risk assessment to determine if there's a need and the type of foreign body detection equipment that is needed, as well as documented justification where no foreign body detection equipment is deemed to be necessary for the organization. It also requires the organization to have a documented procedure on the management and the use of foreign body detection equipment. And then it also needs to have controls in place for foreign matter management, including procedures that relate to the management of breakages, such as glass or hard plastic breakage. Then next, under 2.5.13 on product design and development, the following two requirements were added in relation to 2.5.13e, which is for ongoing shelf life verification. So the organizations need to have a process for ongoing shelf life verification in place, and this needs to be done at a frequency based on risk. And also the organizations, where they have and they produce ready-to-cook products, they need to validate the cooking instructions that they apply onto the packaging or labeling of these ready-to-cook products. And this is to ensure that food safety is being maintained. We ask you to please make sure that you review Part 2 in detail of the scheme in order to familiarize yourself with the new additional requirements added into the existing additional requirements. And as mentioned earlier, we have also published a main changes version of the scheme, which will assist you in identifying changes more easily as well. We will also be, the foundation, we will also be publishing some updated guidance documents on food fraud, food defense, environmental monitoring, as well as transport tanker cleaning during the course of this year still as well. Next, we're going to have a look at some of the brand new additional requirements that have been added into the scheme. And this consists of the new additional requirement on food safety and quality culture, quality control, equipment management, food loss and waste, as well as on communication requirements. So the Foundation is currently working on guidance documents to support CBs and certified organization on implementing some of these brand new additional requirements as well, over and above updating our current guidance documents. And these will also be available during the course of 2023. So we're now going to look at additional requirement 2.5.8 on food safety and quality culture. So as part of the organization's commitment to cultivating a positive food safety culture within their organization, senior management of that organization need to establish, implement, and maintain quality culture objectives as part of the management system. So the elements that need to be considered for food safety and quality include communication, training, employee feedback and engagement, as well as performance measurement of defined activities which cover all sections of the organization which impact on food safety and quality. So these objectives need to be supported by a documented safety and quality culture plan. It needs to have targets and timelines, and it must also be included within the management review and the continuous improvement processes of the organization. It's also important to mention that the addition of this requirement doesn't change the Foundation's approach to food safety culture. It's rather that it is now a specific requirement to facilitate non-conformity management and tracking, as well as for ease of use for the reader and the inclusion of quality. And as mentioned, we will be publishing an updated food safety and quality culture guidance document during the course of this year still as well. So next we're going to have a look at another of the brand new additional requirements and also be touched on briefly earlier. And this is with regards to quality control, additional requirement 2.5.9. So basic quality control requirements have now been incorporated into the scheme. And this requirement was added in the scheme as a result of the output of the FSSC 22000 version 6 development survey. So we received a positive response to including elements of quality into the scheme. And another reason for including some key quality control parameters in version 6 is because it's closely linked to food safety within the manufacturing environment of the organization. And LCB also touched on this earlier, that whilst we did include the requirement for quality policy and objectives within the scheme, it's not designed to replace a full ISO 9001 certification. So it's rather there to focus on the synergies as well as to add value to the audit. So this requirement includes that the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain a quality policy and quality objectives, establish, implement, and maintain quality parameters, which need to be in line with finished product specifications for all the products or product groups. And this needs to include and encompass product release and address quality control and testing. The organization also needs to analyze and evaluate the results of these quality control parameters and include these results as an input into the management review for continuous improvement. Then, in addition to this, the organization also needs to establish and implement quantity control procedures, including for unit, weight, and volume. And this is to ensure that products meet the applicable customer and legal requirements. And the organizations also need to implement a program for calibration and verification of the equipment that they utilize, both for quality and quantity control as well. Lastly, in relation to this additional requirement, the organization also needs to establish and implement line startup and changeover procedures. And this is to ensure that the products, including the packaging and labeling, meet the applicable customer and legal requirements, as well as to ensure that they have controls in place to ensure that the labels and packaging from previous runs have been removed from the line before producing another product. And then, as mentioned on the previous slide, one of the requirements on quality control relates to the organization needing to establish, implement, and maintain quality parameters. And as mentioned, this needs to be in line with the finished product specifications. So here we have an example of quality control parameters. So the first example that we're displaying is for jams and sauces. So it's giving us an indication here that quality control parameters for this product could include things such as acidity, bricks, viscosity, fill height or weight. And the second example we have is for fish fillets, whereby some of the quality control parameters may include parameters such as the firmness of the fillet, is there any scales present on the fillet. So those are just two examples for you to consider with regards to what are possible quality control parameters. Something else important to mention and to note is that, again, auditing is of a sampling nature. So therefore, quality control parameters will be verified as part of the audit sample, but not all quality control parameters of every product or product group will be sampled during each audit. Next, we're going to have a look at equipment management. So this is the new additional requirement on equipment management 2.5.15. And this requires that the organization needs to have a documented purchase specification in place. And this purchase specification needs to address hygienic design, any applicable legal and customer requirements, as well as the intended use of the equipment and what product that equipment will handle. So the supplier shall provide evidence of meeting the purchase specification prior to installation. And the second part of this requirement is that the organization is required to establish and implement a risk-based change management process for new equipment and changes to existing equipment. So this needs to also have successful commissioning in place. So the organization needs to ensure that new equipment or changes to existing equipment also includes documented evidence of successful commissioning. So possible effects on the existing systems and based on the changes that take place with the equipment also needs to be assessed, and adequate control measures need to be determined and implemented in relation to this as well. Next, we're going to have a look at one of the most innovative changes with regards to the scheme, and that is the addition and the inclusion of requirements on food loss and waste. So LCB briefly touched on this earlier as well, and this additional requirement on food loss and waste supports a silo breaking approach, which contributes towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well, the SDGs. So the requirements relating to food loss and waste within version 6 of the scheme includes that the organization needs to have a documented policy and objectives detailing the organization's strategy to reduce food loss and waste within their organization as well as the related supply chain. And organizations, when we consider the FSSC 22,000 scheme, it's good to consider what is the definition of food loss and waste in accordance with the scheme. So food loss occurs before the food reaches the consumer as a result of issues in the supply chain, and then food waste refers to food that is fit for consumption, but is consciously discarded. So in the context of the scheme, food loss and waste is only relating to food. It does not include packaging material wastage at this point. Then in addition to establishing those objectives, the organization also is required to have controls in place to manage products donated to not-for-profit organizations, as well as to employees or other organizations, and then also need to ensure that these products are safe to consume. In addition to this, organizations need to manage any surplus products or byproducts, which are intended for animal feed or animal food. And this is to prevent contamination of these products. And lastly, these processes need to comply with the applicable legislation, and very importantly, the implementation of these requirements relating to food loss and waste shall not have a negative impact on food safety. On the next slide, we're going to show you an example of an objective for food loss and waste in relation to the organization. So in this example, an organization has set the objectives in relation to the organization specifically, and this is to reduce the organization's food wastage by 10% year on year, with an overall reduction of 50% over the next 5 years. So this again is just an example of an objective that could be set by an organization in relation to food loss and waste. So the Foundation will also be publishing a guidance document on food loss and waste during the course of this year still, and this will assist organizations in implementing this new additional requirement. Next, we're going to have a look at the last new additional requirement that we'd like to discuss today, and that's the additional requirement relating to communication. So organizations have been required to notify their certification bodies of serious events and situations within previous versions of the scheme as well. However, version 6 now includes a specific additional requirement on this topic to ensure organizations clearly understand the requirement and for CVs to be able to audit the requirement effectively. So this requirement includes that organizations shall inform the certification body within 3 working days of the commencement of serious events as defined in the scheme, as well as serious situations. And it is for the organization to also implement suitable measures as part of their emergency preparedness and response process as well. So that concludes the last part of the new additional requirements and the main changes to part 2 of the scheme. So we're now at the point where we're going to move into our Q&A portion of this webinar. Core will be moderating this session, so the Q&A portion. So thank you guys for listening to me today, and over to you, Core.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It was a great introduction on FSSC 22000 version 6, and also Elsaby, thank you so much for this. I cannot say we don't have any questions, because if I look at the screen, I think we have over 120 questions. So this is absolutely popular topic. Some of them already have been answered by our colleague Nicole. But I have great questions for you, Elsaby and Kelly. So I hope you're prepared for that, because good questions as always. Can I start with you, Kelly, if that's okay?
Sure.
There are quite some questions on that quality requirements. And one of the specific question is, the policy and objectives. What is expected from FSSC if you talk about quality policy and objectives? And do I need to have it separate in my system, or can I have one policy and objectives covering food safety and the quality together? So can you perhaps elaborate a bit on that?
Sure, cool. And it's a great question. So the organization, nothing stops them from having that as combined with their food safety policy. But they need to have some form of quality policy establishing what their policy is in relation to quality. And they also need to establish what are their objectives in relation to quality for their organization. So as we mentioned, quality is very closely linked to food safety within a manufacturing environment, which is one of the main reasons why we added it into the scheme. So we will also be publishing a guidance document or an interpretation article later during the course of this year to try and assist organizations further with their implementation of this requirement.
Super. And you talk now about those guidance documents. I think there's also quite a lot of questions on guidance documents. Can you say anything when they can be expected, when they are available? I think everyone is waiting for them.
Yes, so we are hoping to have them out during the course of Q3 of this year. So we will definitely be getting them out to the organizations as soon as possible. But we do also like to make sure that what we've got in the guidance document is the most up-to-date information. So like Elsie mentioned earlier, she mentioned our advisory committee. We also like to ensure that the updates also go through the advisory committee to make sure that the guidance that we put in there is relevant and has been approved before we put it out. So we will definitely get those out as soon as we're able to, but hopefully during the course of Q3 of this year.
Okay, super. Thank you. Very good. Talking about guidance document, Elsie, you also talked in the presentation about interpretation documents or interpretation articles, and there are some questions on that. So can you perhaps explain a little bit more? What are these documents and are they available for users? So perhaps you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I can imagine people want to know about it because it's linked to requirements. And I think that's the first thing to explain is that an interpretation article always links to a scheme requirement. So it's not loose from any scheme requirements. It's linked to a specific requirement. And basically it explains how do you audit and how do you apply that specific requirement. And that's one of the key differences between an interpretation article and a guidance document. Because a guidance document is good practice. It assists you with possibilities in terms of how you can apply it, whereas the interpretation article is specifically linked to a scheme requirement. So it also, as Kelly mentioned in her presentation, it also doesn't introduce new requirements. So it's not something in addition to what's already in the scheme. It's further clarification on how to apply it. And then I think to the second part of your question is, where do I find this? What does it mean for organizations, right? Because that would be the bit that they want to know, because you don't want to miss anything. So as Kelly mentioned, we publish these on our knowledge base, which is called My FSSC. And in the scheme requirement, if you go and read it, it actually says that it's the certification body's responsibility to supply the relevant ones to the certified organizations. So it goes back to the requirements for certification bodies, because as you can imagine, we don't have direct contact with 32,000 plus organizations. So we use that communication link to get it out there. So I would emphasize to certified organizations, if there's a requirement that you're not clear on, please check with your certification body whether there is an article available on it. Or ask us if you want.
Okay, super. Thank you so much, Elsie. Kelly, you presented a number of new requirements, and one of them is food waste and loss. And you can imagine we have some questions on that too. So can you please elaborate a little bit about what is expected from certified organizations when we talk about the requirements for food waste and loss?
Sure, cool. So the expectation is that the organization needs to have a strategy in place to reduce their food loss and waste within their organization. So they need to come up with some objectives. As an example, the one that we gave during the presentation today is that, for instance, the organization is establishing an objective to reduce their food loss within their organization by 10% year on year. And then at an overall period, say by 50% over 5 years. So just to contribute towards reducing the amount of food wastage of food that is still of food safety, or that is still safe to consume and still of a expected quality, so to make sure that they are reducing that food wastage. We will also be publishing a guidance document on this as well to also assist organizations in figuring out, well, how do they establish that within their own organization? What objectives should they be looking at? But it is overall looking to see how can they reduce that food loss and food waste within their organization and their related supply chain. And like LCB mentioned earlier as well, this is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically the indicated 12.3 on global food loss and waste. So it all goes towards our foundation's vision of creating a better world as well. So yes, we will also be putting out a guidance document on it.
Yeah. And I assume many organizations have already a policy and objectives for food waste and loss. So I think many of them just have to ensure that it's also included in their management system and be able to show it to the auditor. Am I correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay, super. Thank you. One more specific question, Kelly, because you know so much about it. And hygienic design, that is also, I think, great improvement of FSSC 22000. A very specific question. Is this only for new machines and equipment or also for the old machines and equipment? So what is the applicability for organizations that have to implement this?
Yes, so no, it's a great question, Cor. It's not only for new equipment, it's also for any changes that are being made to existing equipment as well. So existing equipment would also be required to be considered for hygienic design when they're going through any form of change as well within the organization. And again, we'll also be putting out a guidance document on this as well with a really a lot of informative information on how organizations can take this into account within their organization.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Something about the transition, Elsby, the upgrade from version 5.1 to version 6. The two questions I like to combine, if that's okay for you. First of all, can organizations still this year go for version 5.1? Do they need to wait the next year version 6, or can they still this year have version 5.1 certification?
They need to have version 5.1 certificates.
New ones.
Oh, the new ones, sorry.
Sorry, I was not clear.
Okay.
New ones.
New ones, all right. Now, new ones for this year, they need to order to version 5.1. Version 6 is only available as of the 1st of April next year.
Yeah. And I would say, start with it this year. Don't wait for next year, because version 5.1, you meet already 90% perhaps of also version 6.
Yeah, no, definitely you should not wait to start. The difference is just that you will start with version 5.1, as you say, and then there's maybe a 10% difference that you need to address, but that you will have a whole year to do when it comes around to your next audit.
And the second question, that is related to this topic. Next year, January, an organization wants to start with FSSC, and they have stage 1, stage 2. Can they then do a stage 1 in January, and if they have the stage 2 after April, what do they need to do? Because that might be a bit confusing, I think.
Yeah, and actually it's a very good and a relevant question, because in real life that happens.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the scenarios we have in our upgrade paper, explained, so people can go read it back. But in essence, if you start in the beginning of next year with a stage 1, that is to version 5.1. And then if your stage 2 order takes place before April, that will also be to version 5.1. But if stage 2 takes place after April, or as of the 1st of April, then it's possible to do it to version 6, and it will result in a version 6 certificate.
Okay.
So we have taken that into account, because realistically, because it's a two-part approach to the initial audit, it can happen that you sort of end up on two sides of the timeline.
Yeah. And you talked about the upgrade paper. Where can that be found?
So the upgrade paper is on our website, under the scheme document section. So there's a very nice feature that you can download all of the version 6 documents. So it's included in the package. And that's also, by the way, where the main changes document is. Okay,
super. Yeah. Thank you, Elsby. Thank you. Kelly, like a nice question for you, I think. All those categories, it's a great overview, but it's sometimes difficult to understand what type of product or what type of activity fits in what category. is there any supportive documents or information if organization wants to know, yeah, where does my product or my activity fit? So can you say something about that, please?
Yeah, sure, cool. So besides the scheme document itself under part 1, which describes and gives examples of the different products, we also have Annex 1 to the scheme, which also goes through further information relating to those different categories as well. And again, these categories all relate back into the ISO 22003 Part 1 standard as well. So you can also have a look at that. But again, our Annex 1 of our scheme gives it also a further information with regards to those different categories.
Yeah, super. Thank you. So I think, will that document also be updated, or is that already updated?
So Annex 1 is already updated. It's part of the scheme package that also be referred to. So again, when you download, freely downloadable, the scheme package off our website, Annex 1 is included within that.
Yeah, and am I remembering correctly, there was also a kind of scope statement document in the past. Is that still there?
Yes, that's the document that I'm referring to when I say Annex 1. That's our EV scope statement document.
Super, thank you so much. Yeah, if you talk about integrated management systems, Elsevier, yeah, important for organizations. This is a very specific question, I think. Version 6, does that still fit in an integrated management system approach where organizations want to use more ISO management system standards like 9001, 14000, 45001, and perhaps even FSSC 24000? So perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on that, because I think it's also an important topic.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good question. I don't know if people can recall, but in the presentation, we had the slide that showed the 3 components of the scheme. And one of the biggest components is ISO 22000, which is written to the harmonized structure. And that is exactly the same in version 5.1 as it is in version 6. So it is still the same. It is aligned or easily integrated with other management systems like 9001, for example, and hopefully even 24000 if companies want to do that. So definitely from that perspective, there's no change between version 5.1 and version 6.
So that integrated management system approach that can still be used by organizations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we actually recommend if organizations do have multiple management systems, it makes sense to integrate them from an efficiency perspective. Why not? Yeah,
no, it's good. And our previous webinar, I think, Insights webinar, was on integrated management systems. And if you are interested in the topic and you missed this great webinar, there is still a recording available on our website. So you can go back also to previous webinars if you're interested in these topics. Okay, more specific one, Kelly. They're going to test you now, I think, but you don't mind, I know that. Pet food. Pet food moved from animal feed to human food. Yeah, why was that? Why was it moved?
So from an FSC's perspective, as I mentioned, we utilize the categories within ISO 22003 Part 1. So that standard was newly published last year in updated version. And within that, the ISO organization, within the working group that determines that is where that change was made. So with the change in the ISO 22003 Part 1 document, the decision was made in order to change it from category D in order to include it within category C. So that is how that change was brought about into our scheme. So from ISO 22003 Part 1 into the FSSC scheme. So that was the reason why we changed it within our scheme to align it with the ISO 22003 categories.
Okay. And there is one question, very specific. Someone asked, I'm producing ingredients for pet food. So which category do I belong then when I produce ingredients for pet food?
So it'll be within the relevant category C categories, food chain category, unless, for instance, it is an additive or preservative, then that would fall under category K.
K, yeah? K is for additive and preservative. So it's either one of them, C or K.
Correct.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. Yeah, looking at the clock, time flies when you have fun. It's always a pity when we have to end this session with all those great questions. But the time is over for us. I hope you enjoyed this webinar very much, and I hope we gave you some good insights on FSSC 22000 version 6. We did not answer all your questions, but we will make a selection of that. We will come back on our social media, LinkedIn page to answer more of your questions. And if you have questions you really want to have a direct answer, contact us. You can go to our website. It's very easy to raise a question, and it will be directly raised to the right people in FSSC. So please come with your questions, either through the website, either through our representatives. Please try to find us, and we will give you the answers. Don't forget 12th September, as I said, that's the Insights webinar on FSSC 24000, our certification program for social management programs and systems. And big thanks to Elsevier, and also a very big thanks to South Africa, to Kelly. I think you both did a great job. And thank you so much for joining us and having attention for our webinar. Please stay connected with us. We also have a newsletter, if you don't know, also available on the website. So see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.